welcome to another episode of Jay Leno's Garage. The vehicle we're featuring today, my 1940 Indian 4 with the Sidecar. I love this bike. This is what you call just a good old girl. It's reliable, it's powerful. This was a real luxury motorcycle back in the day. This was about the same price as a car. In fact, a little bit more expensive than most cars. They didn't make a whole lot of them because the Depression was still going on. Even in 1940, people were still getting a little strapped for cash, so they didn't sell a whole lot of these. In fact, a lot of people thought Indian made a big mistake making this 4 when they sort of concentrated on making an overhead valve V-twin like Harley Davidson. But I'm glad they did, because I just like this thing. It's smooth. It's pretty easy to start. It's not really high compression. You can just drop your foot and she idles really nicely, and they're incredibly smooth. Now, if you're a real Indian aficionado, you'll see a lot of mistakes on this bike. For example, this front end, somebody years and years ago decided to chrome it. Actually, this bike has kind of a celebrity provenance. It used to belong to Joe Montana, you know, the 49ers quarterback. This was his bike, so I tracked him down one day and asked him about it, and then we had a nice long talk. I've had it for a long time. It doesn't have the correct Indian seat. It's got a Harley Davidson seat. I found the original Indian seat, and I just kept this one. I just thought it looked better, and I can carry 3 people now with it. You know, it's a 3-speed transmission, foot clutch. The throttle's been converted to here. You know, a lot of Indians have the throttle on this side, which just gets too confusing when you go from bike to bike. You just kill yourself. So I converted it over. Love the stick shift. And of course, this was, when you think of Indian 4s, this is the model most people think of with the big skirted fenders like this. This was sort of the styling, what's that word, coup de grace, whatever it is. Anyway, I've got a few Indian 4s. And all Indian 4s came from the Henderson brothers. William and Tom, I think their name was. They sold out to Schwinn Bicycles when they built their Henderson in 1918. Then they started the Ace Motorcycle Company. I've got an Ace. That was the fastest 4-cylinder bike of the day. Really, really quick. But once again, they weren't good businessmen. In 1922, I think it was, he died testing one. So then Ace got sold to Indian. Indian became the Indian Ace, and then it became the Indian 4. And then the Ace part of it just sort of disappeared. That's a brief history of 4-cylinder American motorcycles. The cool thing about this is it's so different from the European approach to motorcycles. This was meant to cover vast distances fairly reliably and under stress. The English and the Japanese certainly built high revving motorcycles. This was just a big thumper, you know, and dead on reliable. Automotive style ignition system, big giant generator to run your lights, a really understressed motor, 77 cubic inches, which is just about 1,300 cc's, 1260, something like that. So it was a big motor. It's what do they call it? Inlet over exhaust type of engine. Basically a flathead, not a full flathead, but pretty, I guess it's safe to call it a flathead. 1940 was kind of the best year, as I said. It had the plunger suspension, it had the skirted fenders, you had, what else did you have here? Of course, the Sidecar with a spare tire. This one is all Indian. You know, I might restore it back to the way it was someday, but for right now, it's just too much fun to drive, and I hate to see it go down for 6 months going through the whole thing, when actually it runs perfectly well. When I got it, we went through the motor, we did pistons, and cleaned it up a little bit, and they run fine. They're just wonderful bikes. You know, Indians were built in Springfield, Massachusetts. What else can I tell you here? Drum brakes, obviously, front and back. You've got a wet sump oiling system here. Everything is really easy to do on this. You check the oil right here. So you do that. You got your dipstick. And that might be a little low. And you always want to be sure to leave a big oil spot on the floor for somebody else to clean up. ignition here, got a little spare toolbox here, got your floorboards. These are great fun to drive long distances because they're really, really comfortable. You know, you've got the, you don't have the vibration of a V-twin. You've got an inline 4, which is basically a car engine. You know, most American cars, the Model T was a 4-cylinder, and most motorcycles back in the day were single-cylinder or maybe a twin. 4s were, that was just considered the height of luxury. And the 4s weren't necessarily faster than the big V-twins like the Harley Knuckle or anything top end wise, but they were just incredibly smooth. Police departments liked them because you can have a little lower compression with 4 cylinders. You just drop your foot and she starts. As you see, it's sprung here. You got your spare tire here. I always like the Indian head logo on here. You know, it's interesting, in these days of political correctness, you would have thought maybe Indian might have taken some heat for using the Indian logo. But always very respectful, you know. Heidi, something like that, the guy who was president of Indian, he had always had great respect for the Indian culture, and he never denigrated them in any way. You know, he's always, there was the chief, there was the scout. You know, he didn't do anything, there was no funny logo or, you know, crazy Indian things. He was always very respectful. So consequently, to this day, Indians never had that problem because it was meant to show strength and pride and dignity. And that's really what the Indian did. Indian went out of business about 1953. You know, they just didn't change with the times. They stayed with the flathead engine just a little too long. And consequently, they paid the price for it. But this was the heyday. In 1940, 41, to me, those are the ultimates. That's when they got the engine down. I think it's 5 main bearings, if I'm not mistaken. And the cylinders were cast in pairs, so that made it a little easier. They're just a lot of fun to drive and a lot of fun to, well, not drive, ride really. They're just so big and imposing looking. You know, you've got basically like, it looks like a bumper on the front here. You got this lights up at night. You got your spring frame here. It's all very automotive. You know, as I said, with the generator, big giant battery, sprung frame. You know, you got all your lubrication points here and here. And these sidecars are a lot of fun. Most sidecars have a door. This one you just step up and get over and in it. And no muffler, straight through exhaust. Nice gauge package. You've got your ammeter here, your oil pressure, and your speedometer. And this has the telltale. You see that red line there? That was the last speed you achieved, and you press this to reset it. So the last speed I achieved on this bike was about 73 miles an hour, which is pretty good for 1940. These were really, really fast. This is what all the police forces used to catch speeders, you know, and because they were reliable, they were dependable, and they were easy to work on. You know, everything's right in front of you. You know, there's not a lot to take apart. I mean, look at that ignition system there. I mean, pretty cool. It's got a side stand, which you obviously don't need because you have the sidecar, of course. Well, let's start it up here. Turn the key on. Kick it through, get some fuel into it. There we go, sounds like she wants to go. There you go. Very rich sound. There's your advance and retard on the ignition here. You've got your magneto right here. You know, good mags are great because even if your battery goes dead, you can always get out of there. And as you can see, extremely comfortable bike and very smooth. Notice it doesn't rock when you rev it. Let me put my jacket on and we'll put some cameras on it and we'll take it for a spin. Although 40 horsepower doesn't sound like a whole lot, especially today, back in the day that was more than respectable. You know, most motorcycles had about 15 horsepower, maybe 20. But you had a lot of torque, you know. These old motors could really pull from down low. And it's just such a great cruiser. And you gotta admit, it looks terrific. If you've never driven a sidecar, it takes some getting used to. You usually wind up in the bushes first or second corner until you get the hang of it. Nice thing is, you come to a stop, you don't have to put your feet down. Bad thing is, sometimes you forget the sidecars there, you wind up taking out parked cars. But there's nothing on this bike you can't fix with a hammer. This is obviously not a stock Indian color. I don't know who painted it this color, somebody somewhere down the line. I think it was this color when Joe got it. But it's all right, I just kind of keep it up. You know, I like to keep it mechanically perfect. As I said, we did pistons, we did rings, the crank, the whole deal, new bearings, everything. So now she just runs really nicely. As you see, it started on the second kick. It's just so different, as I said, from the European approach to motorcycling. You know, this is a big, comfortable bike with a nice, big, wide seat, really comfortable bars. You know, it's for a Sunday drive or just cruising, it's really fantastic. And on the freeway, she'll hold 70, 75, no problem all day long. There's all sorts of rumors about these things, you know, the rear cylinder would glow red from the heat in the summertime at night and all this kind of stuff, but I've never had that problem. It's not a bad idea to put an oil cooler on it. I just haven't done it on this one because when it's really hot, I'll probably take something else. On a day like today, 65, 70 degrees, just perfect. And I love the hand shift. And the sidecar makes it easy to use. You know, when you're trying to pull away from a hill on one of these things, without the sidecar, you've got to work the clutch with this foot, and you've got to keep from falling over, so there's a lot of work to do. You know, the key to any old bike like this is having a really strong magneto. You got a magneto, got no problem. You know, they're pretty simple. You just need to get air, gas, and spark together in one place. And if you're not getting the spark, it makes the whole bike seem like it's a piece of junk. So you have somebody go, there are a lot of good mag guys around. Just get a really good mag, spin it by hand, see if it makes a nice spark. You put it in the bike, and they'll always start first or second kick. Plus, unlike a foot shifter where you're always finding false neutrals, you know, this thing you just put the lever where you want it. Just big gears go like this or interchange. That's fantastic. I mean, once you ride it, you see how it got the name the Duesenberg of motorcycles. Because it really was a luxury vehicle. I guess this was $1,000 when a Chevrolet was like $895, something like that. So to have one of these, you had to have a few bucks. The Indian guru around here was a guy named Max Brubeck. He was a fascinating guy. Been to my garage a couple of times. He set a lot of records back in the, 30s, 40s, 50s. He had the world's fastest four. I think he went like, first he went 108, and then he went 120, I think, something like that, which doesn't seem like a lot by modern standards, but back in the day, that was pretty huge for a heavy, low-revving motorcycle like this. But as I said, top speed and drag racing, that's not what these bikes are about. These bikes are about comfort and reliability. You know, at a time when most motorcycles were not very reliable, these really were. Just had the magneto, 4 cylinders, so every time you kicked it through, instead of getting 1 spark or 2 sparks, you got 4. So your chances of starting were much better. And of course, the Indian horn. You could pull away from 8 miles an hour in top gear all the way to 100 without any lurching or loading the motor. So that's pretty cool. This is exactly the kind of road this bike was designed for. Fast 2-lane roads like this. You know, this thing hits its sweet spot about 60 miles an hour, just kind of settles in, and that's where it likes to be. Once you get over 70, you're kind of pushing it a bit. So something like this, you can cruise around a little bit, see a bit of the scenery, have all kinds of torque. Really no need to downshift. I mean, if you look in my mirror, you'll see there's no vibration at all. If this is a twin or a British vertical twin, that would be like this. Whereas this thing is just really smooth, and you can see everything behind you. You know, you could put 25 grand or 30 grand into restoring this thing and make it perfect, but it wouldn't ride any better. You know, it rides just perfectly, runs wonderfully, comfortable. That's why I kind of keep it the way it is. It's got an interesting history with Joe Montana and all of that stuff. I hope I'm accurately portraying how much fun this is to ride. You know, it isn't all about high speed. I got a lot of fast bikes, and fast bikes are fun, but sometimes it's not just to go cruising around and let that torque just pull you. Let's put our cameraman in the sidecar. This will be his first time in a sidecar, so this should be very humorous. And he can show you what it's like from his point of view. Plus, I'll be able to take turns a little quicker because it's not going to tip over. Let's put him in there. Come on, let's do it. The only thing that bothers me is the prettiest side is covered by the sidecar. You got your exhaust system here. That's supposed to be porcelain, but as you can see, it's pretty worn off. Get a shot in the mirror and you'll see no vibration at all, which is actually pretty cool. You know, most bikes from this era, this mirror you wouldn't be able to see behind you. As I said before, I hope I was able to convey how much fun this thing is to ride. You know, we got a lot of fast bikes around here, H2 Kawasaki's, we got the Aprilia V4, and all kinds of exciting stuff like that. But sometimes you just want to go for a ride, you know? And on a Sunday morning, there's nothing better than this old Warhorse. It just pulls nicely, it's got a nice rhythm to it. It's one of the things you either get it or you don't. And I don't know if I'd ever restore it, because like I say, it's kind of like my Gullwing Mercedes, you know, the one I got that's kind of rough on the outside. You can treat it just like you would any old bike. You know, just change the oil, keep it running, keep it greased, keep it lubricated, worry about the aesthetics later. As I said, it's not perfect. Got the wrong seat, somebody chromed the forks. But mechanically, it's exactly as it was when it left the factory. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.